Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming to our spoiler alert. Yes, I know it's supposed to be winter camp, but we all have spring fever, so let's celebrate our almost spring WeWiC Zoom webinar camp. My name is Lisa Kivers, and I'm honored to be on our Wisconsin Women in Conservation WeWiC team, along with a great group of women. Everybody on my team, give a wave here, who will be helping in any way they can, always, but especially today, if there's any questions or anything that you have on really anything under the umbrella of conservation. And I work in the with Renewing the Countryside, one of our partner groups on this WeWiC team, and I'm honored to be hosting for today. And again, a welcome and shout out to everyone here and to spring and things to come and all of those good things. So on that note, I am going to turn things over to our mighty project lead for WeWiC, Esther Shekina, who is with the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute. We are here today, 3 years into this program now, thanks to Esther's leadership, and are very grateful. And she's going to give us some top lines, big pictures on WeWiC, some fun things to come, a lot of really exciting things to come, and then we'll roll from there. So again, please introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already. Share your favorite sign of spring. And we always have a very abundant chat during these sessions, so please get to know each other, keep questions coming, and take it away, Esther.
Thank you for all of you to come in today, especially for our winter webinar. Caring for your land and yourself, balancing conservation and our chaotic lives. So thank you for the experts who are here on the panel and all of our landowner friends who are going to share their stories today. And then this is a partnership between 4 organizations: Michael Fields Ag Institute, Marble Feed, Wisconsin Farmers Union, and Renewing the Countryside. We are funded by the NRCS, which is a part of USDA. There are a lot of events that's lined up. This is a place where we bring women together, share their stories, as well as their helping people to just connect to one another and learn from peers. And we have a lot of things lined up for 2023. I'm just going to start with, we have our Educator Network Zoom call coming up next week. And if you are an educator in any way, shape, or form, as a professional or just as a volunteer or as a woman landowner connecting with another landowner trying to teach them conservation, please join us next week. The event is live on our website. You can register yourself. And the big thing that's coming up, we are so excited as a WeWiC team to bring this up for the first time in Wisconsin, the Educator Conference in person at Stevens Point on April 28, 2023. Registrations are open. It's only a $25 registration fee. Space is limited, so if you want to be there learning something along with us as we share our experiences, please go to our website at www.wiwic.org and register yourself for this conference. And we also, through the year, we have 6 spring learning circles coming up, 6 field days in different parts of Wisconsin, followed up with a fall learning circle. And we have a great lineup for summer webinars. We are so excited to bring it to the team here. It's going to be fun. I'm not going to give out the titles. It's going to be really fun. So please join us for our summer webinars as well. We have a lookbook launch. We're bringing great stories about women in Wisconsin in conservation. That'll be in October. We bring professional program resources to all the women landowners in the state, and bring the technical help for conservation plans. We have, as I mentioned, the Educator Network events. We have 6 events in a year, and the first one of this year is coming up next week. Okay, this is a beautiful picture. Where is this? This is I want you all to be here joining us at this place. This is the spring conference that I talked about a little while earlier. This is at Stevens Point. This is a Century World, and we want you all to join us in this beautiful place, sharing and learning experience. So here it is. If we have a QR code there, please just point your smartphones to the QR code. Go ahead and register right now. We would love to have you all there if you're an educator in any shape, sense, or form. And then we also have our WeWiC listserv. We welcome you all to be a part of it. Just send us an email at info@wiwic.org saying that you want to be a part of that our network, and we will add you on. Finally, a warm welcome to Julie Peterson and Gretchen Skadlarczyk. They both are Pheasants Forever farm bill biologists, and I know Julie is a wetland specialist. They both are here. Give a raise your hand if you're here and if you can see them on our screens. And they are here with us. They'll be engaged with you all in our chats. If you have any questions, they'll be answering us. So thank you and a warm welcome to them as well. With this, I hand it over to Lisa. Back to you.
All right, I muted myself. Thank you, Esther, and thanks everybody for coming again. Today's really unique in that we're gonna have a really special session together where we're both learning conservation from each other as women committed to stewarding our land, but take it a notch deeper on this topic of caring for ourselves while we care for the land. And how can we do that in tandem, in partnership, with joy, with fun, with all of those things, and to do it together as a community. And for folks, give me a wave if you've been to one of our WeWiC events over the last 2 years now, and hopefully you've experienced one of our learning circles. That is the unique aspect of WeWiC, is we are just designed for women, and how women learn best and how we learn best, big surprise, is from each other. So creating these spaces, even when we can do it in the virtual setting and bring us together to talk and share about our experiences, about our needs, about our concerns, is always what we need to move forward. But again, today is a special session because we need to care for ourselves in conjunction with this, the mental health aspects of ourselves, our families, our stories, and how we balance that, or attempt to balance that, or just attempt to go to extremes and bounce back. All of those things are on the table today. So we're in for, I know, some inspiring messages as we move into the spring. And on that note of self-care and fun, our drink demo, we started this last session in February with a warm drink demo from the good folks at Siren Shrubs. And today, again, given the spontaneous spring stuff, I didn't want to do something warm. So I'm going to share with you a original WeWiC recipe. We'll stick it in the chat. We'll get it in the notes post-session too, of the WeWiC Cheers to Spring Sangria with multiple Wisconsin flavors. So live from my kitchen to yours. First you need a jar, all right? And then we're gonna add in about 1/8 of a cup, or about a shot, of tart cherry juice. This is Door County's finest. Lots, and this one has even a little health to it, if you will. The tart cherries in particular have all kinds of antioxidants. They have the same elements as melatonin, so have this before you go to bed at night. Really good, and Wisconsin proudly made. So we put that in there, and then I add about 1/8 of a cup of maple syrup, Wisconsin maple syrup. I saw several folks in the chat saying that's their sign of spring, is taps flowing. For a little bit of sweetness, I use equal parts of tart cherry juice and maple syrup. You can adjust that. This is a build your own adventure kind of beverage. Okay, so we have that, and then for a little bit of citrus, I add a little splash of straight from Key West lime juice into here. You mix that up a little bit, and then if you want to make the grown-up evening nighttime beverage of this, you can add, but totally optional, it'll work great as a mocktail, a shot of vodka. I live outside of Monroe, Wisconsin, where Minhas Distillery is. So this is their Wisconsin Club vodka, which, you know, when you make a cocktail, you don't necessarily have to use the highest quality of booze because it's going with other flavors. So the jug of Wisconsin Club works just fine in these settings. You mix it around a little bit, and then top it off, also from Wisconsin, Claiborne, which, yeah, is made in Waterton. This is the Wisconsin's flavor of them all, Bucky's Cherry Berry, and put it in how you like. A little bubbles, a little ice, add that to it. And then for fun, because it is a sangria, we're going to add some apples and some cherries. Again, Door County cherries. Now, what I did last summer when we were on our Door County road trip is I stopped by Sequest Orchard on Door County. They're one of the oldest cherry growers around. And I highly recommend getting the 28-pound frozen tub of cherries, which I had to convince my husband on to take home. But by the time we got home, it was a little mushy. And then I could divide it, you know, into 2-pound bags. And I've been enjoying this all winter. and now in this beverage. So we'll get you the recipe. Cheers from all of us at WeWick to our Wisconsin women in conservation community, to what will be a fantastic season growing all together. And yeah, all right. So moving on to our content of the day here. I have the honor of introducing three fabulous women, and we are kicking things off with Heather Lynch of Greenhaven Gardens. Welcome, Heather. Thank you so much for coming. Heather, if you need inspiration on how to learn gardening, learn farming, learn your land, and do this all yourself, it's Heather, because she is self-made, self-taught in the most collaborative spirit I've ever met. So she has gone through anything from the Master Gardener program. She's been to multiple WeWick programs. She's here in our Southern Soil Sisters community, has done there. And as we all know, the way we learn best is through teaching others, and has always had a generous spirit in inviting people to her land, sharing her story. And both Heather and Michelle Harrigan, you'll meet in a second, are part of a new project. We are partnering with the Women Food and Ag Network, folks might be familiar with. There's a team of what are called WeFan Conservation Ambassadors, who are women landowners who are championing their stories, in particular, of all sorts of places. So that is another hat that both Heather and Michelle are wearing this season, and we are grateful. And so anyway, if you need inspiration for the spring, it's coming in bushels right now, and I will turn things over to Heather. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, let me get my screen up. So yes, I'm Heather Lynch. I'm a self-taught gardener, as Lisa mentioned, and I grow my own food, and I grow food for my community. My husband and I live in Brooklyn, Wisconsin. Thank you. I can see that. Yeah, and so we call our property Greenhaven Gardens. I think what you can see right now is us in my vegetable garden, which is very much my happy place. So yes, I came to conservation through means of growing my own food. I grew up eating local seasonal food. My dad took me along with him when he shopped the Dane County Farmers Market and when he went foraging. But then once I was out of the house, I missed eating like that. And I couldn't really afford the same quality of ingredients. So I decided that I wanted to grow my own. And my dad had a little garden, but he didn't really show me how to grow anything. So I ended up having to teach myself, which I did through a lot of reading and trial and error. And I quickly learned that once I was growing in healthy soil and bringing the harvest from my garden directly to my table or into the kitchen, it made for the most delicious food that I had tasted. So I was hooked. And I harvested a lot of produce from my little tiny Madison garden. But it also taught me about like all the other benefits that you get when you start caring for plants and for soil and for a piece of land. And it became clear that when I treated the land well, it gave me a ton in return. So yes, we did outgrow that space, and we moved in 2019 out of Madison to rural Brooklyn, Wisconsin in Greene County. We have a little under 9 acres out here, and the size and the layout is perfect for our goals. We're kind of tucked back over a hill, so it's quiet and it kind of feels like our own little world. And when we came out here, I had a very long to-do list. I wanted to add a kitchen garden. I wanted to plant natives. I wanted to plant an orchard, get animals. And I just had this really long list of things. But once I was out here, I realized I was a little bit out of my depth because I grew up on 1/10 of an acre, and taking care of 9 acres was already intimidating. And some of our property is in rough shape. It was previously cropland that had been pretty well eroded, and then it wasn't treated very kindly when our house was built. So the topsoil has been literally scraped clean in some areas. And I realized I didn't really have anyone to talk to at that point. My friends were city gardeners. I didn't have a lot of connections in our community yet. And I didn't even know where to go as a resource. So my dream come true was kind of feeling a little overwhelming. And my normal response to overwhelm is to just rush through things and get it all done. And despite the really long to-do list that I had, I knew that I couldn't do that out here with these projects because I needed to get to know the land and the soil and the microclimate and what was already here before I could make big changes and start big projects. So our first winter, we spent prioritizing our projects. And we also talked about prioritizing our mental health because one of the reasons we wanted to come out here was for less stress. And so we were trying to be cognizant of not letting our projects become stressors. So while we were that first winter, we kind of decided that we were going to pick one big project per year, and that has worked pretty well for us. So in spring of 2020, if you want to move through a couple slides, please. In spring of 2020, we decided that our highest priority was feeding ourselves. And so our first project was going to be my vegetable garden. And thankfully that was, it was clear where we were going to put that, because there is a kind of south facing slope on our property that I can see from my kitchen window. And I knew that it would be the perfect spot for a garden. Apparently it didn't look like it was a good spot, because a neighbor stopped by and said that nothing would grow there because the soil had been so eroded. But I like a challenge. And I knew that if I added no-till raised beds on top of that area, it would allow me to grow food where I probably couldn't grow a lot else at that point. And it would also start healing the land at that same time. So that spring, we installed 40 raised beds, and we were eating homegrown salads again by April. And I don't know if the picture will come up. But yeah, that we actually started the first week of March in 2020. So it was not only about feeding ourselves, but it really felt like it was an outlet for all of the stress and the anxious energy that was going on in the world, which is kind of my garden for me often, is this outlet for those feelings. In 2020, we mostly stuck to the plan that we had, and the garden did feed us really well that first year. But we did have a little bit more time on our hands because of COVID. We didn't have a lot of social engagements to do that summer. That's perfect, Esther. So my husband wanted to add a flock of chickens to free range out here. And because we had already had chickens in Madison, that wasn't a big stretch. And by the end of the summer, I wanted to plant something else. So I did install a pollinator garden with a lot of native plants from Prairie Nursery. But overall, we did take it slow. And the chaos of that year of 2020 really reminded us that we need to make space and time in our plans for the unknown. Because if we would have added more stress that year, I don't think we would have been able to handle it. Okay, you can go to the next one, hopefully. So by 2021, we had started to connect a little bit more with our community. A friend of mine invited me to join the Soil Sisters listserv, and I had been slowly getting to know who was in the area, the other women that were working the land. And our big project for 2021 was to start an orchard. So I sent out an email to the listserv, and I asked if I could get a second opinion from someone in the area about the area that I had chosen for our orchard. And through that, I connected with a local woman, Emily Steinway, who specializes in planning and planting food forests. And she came out to our property and confirmed that my location was a good one and helped me visualize everything that we could do in that space. And having her out here provided the confidence boost that I needed to proceed with the orchard. And in April, we planted 20 different fruit and nut trees with the help of some friends. And then this actually ended up being a bigger project than we thought too, because it was a drought that summer. And so we spent a lot of time making sure that our new trees were properly watered. And then, in 2022, I knew that I wanted to shift our focus from the 2 acres that we have fenced in around our home to the other part of our property. And this is about 7 acres, and we call it the wild part, or the wild yard. And in this area, we want to practice conservation rather than cultivation. We want to leave this as a habitat for wildlife. And we knew that there was things that we needed to do out there to keep it healthy and improvements that we could do to bring in more wildlife, but we really had no idea what those things could be. If you can go to the next slide, please. So serendipitously, in January of 2022, Lisa sent out an email to the listserv asking if there would be volunteers interested in learning more about their land. And I immediately responded because this was exactly what I was looking for. And so I joined a group of 20 other Greene County women landowners as the first Soil Sisters WeWiC cohort. And we worked with Tanya from Greene County Land and Water to design a land conservation plan for our acreage. And the first step for this was to have Tanya out here for a land walk. So we walked all over our property, and it was just so fun to have her there to be able to answer questions and identify what we have. And she listened to our goals and our dreams for our land, as well as our concerns. And like one of our big concerns is our pond, which is in quotes because it doesn't really hold water very well. But we do know that it holds a ton of life, because in a couple of weeks, it's going to start. There's going to be a chorus of spring peepers that I hear every time I go outside. And we'd love for it to be to be able to support even more wildlife. So we would like to restore it in the future. So a few weeks after the land walk, we got our conservation plan back from Tanya, and that was so helpful. The best part about it is that it simplifies and clearly lays out tangible steps that we can make to actually have a significant conservation impact on our land. So she gave us suggestions like using a prescribed burn to encourage natives, which we are hoping to do this year, advice on which trees we should encourage because they're good wildlife habitat versus the ones that may cause some problems in the future. And then she also gave us guidance on what we can do with our pond to make it more effectively capture rainwater while excluding runoff from the nearby farm fields. So Tanya's plan broke down our goals into steps and then paced them out over the next few years, which is exactly what I was trying to do with not taking on too much each year. And I'm really grateful to WeWick and Tanya for the opportunity. It's been so fun, and we're looking forward to continuing our conservation plan. You can go to the next slide. So another aspect of mental health that I wanted to hit on, it's very personal to me, is how much joy and well-being I get from just being in my garden. Being around plants, listening to wildlife, feeling the soil and the sunshine, it all just recharges me and uplifts me. And then on the flip side, I struggle a lot in the winter. I really wish that I could embrace this time as a time of rest, but I have seasonal affective disorder, and the gloom and the quiet and the lack of vitamin D in the winter really gets me down. And I do still get outside a lot. I take a lot of walks with my dogs, and it does help. But I wanted to share something very practical that has helped my winter mental health in recent years. And it actually ties, if you want to go to the next slide, it ties directly in with my conservation goals. I want to add a ton of native plants to our landscape, and I want to dramatically increase the diversity out here. And I do plant some of them as plugs or starts, but fitting in time in the spring to start some of the tricky to grow perennial seedlings, along with everything that I start from my own annual vegetable garden, felt like a lot. So a few years ago, I started using a method called winter sowing, which is where you plant your seeds in little greenhouses that are made out of recycled milk jugs or other jugs. And then you plop them out in the snow, you leave them alone, and then the seeds come up when they're ready. And so this method works really, really well. It's been wildly successful for me. And it works well for seeds that require stratification or are hard to germinate inside. And as an added bonus, I found that digging in the soil, even if it's just potting soil, has a big impact on my winter mood. So this method takes a little weight off of my spring to-do list. It results in a ton of healthy plants that cost me pennies, and it provides a welcome gardening distraction during a time that's difficult for me. There's a lot of great resources online for this, and I highly recommend it if you need a way to start gardening when there's still snow on the ground. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for navigating tech with grace.
Thank you for your
help.
help.
All right. So, all good. So we are going to move on now to Michelle Harrigan, who is also someone who's participated in the WeWick Conservation Land Plans. And I added in the chat, if you're interested in doing one of those with us, we'd love that. Right now, there's certain regions of the state that we're working in, but if you want to send an email, and I have it in the chat, to info@wewick.org with the county you're in and a little bit on your property, we will gladly keep in touch there. So Michelle is also my neighbor, kind of a couple miles north of me, and she runs Food Web Farms in Monroe with her family, where they do a variety of things, including I get my eggs from her, and they have a solar array and are always trying new things. Most recently, I heard pheasants. So always an experiment of learning. But what I really admire about Michelle, and you'll hear in her story, is it's an inspiration to us all as women. Like, are there other passions that we have, and how can we integrate those into our conservation, our land journey? And Michelle has always been such an advocate for mental health awareness. She runs various groups. She still runs a great group that gets together every week of women in my Greene County area here, just to connect and keep connected, particularly during the winter months. So she learns, she acts, and she's a great resource and example of that. And on that note of mental health, we wanted to, before I turn things here to Michelle, to get a little bit of feedback from folks here on, especially after hearing, Heather's story to kick us off, and you look at your own situation. What are some of the top stressors on your own conservation journey? Just pick one quick. Where do you feel overwhelmed? Lack of time, lack of cash, lack of knowledge, or you just don't know where to start, and that overwhelmed deer in the headlights look that I have frequently. Give give it a quick answer and we'll see where we all are together here. Oh, probably a little bit of all. Oh, thanks. Gretchen just put a list of prescribed burn services in the Eau Claire area because somebody asked that question. So take advantage of those 2 Pheasants Forever women in particular in the Zoom room. If there's very specific questions you have, even if they're just not related to anything we're talking about, totally fine. Just stick it in the chat and they will gladly keep an eye out on that. And please, as we move forward, if there's things in the chat that you know personally, shout it out. That's what it's all about. So, okay. Let me share with here, folks. We seem to be, not surprisingly, primarily lack of time, but a little bit of everything. Lack of funds, lack of knowledge, and don't know where to start. So we have a buffet of needs for you, Michelle, as you share your story. We will have those examples floating. So thank you very much, Michelle, and take it from there.
Okay, hopefully I grew up on a small conventional dairy farm here in Wisconsin. It was there that I learned about farming from my dad. He, like his dad before him, had a passion for farming. I went off to college, but then after graduation, I came back home and helped on the farm while I worked at the local school. Unfortunately, a short time later, my dad could no longer make a living at it and had to sell the cows and went to work in a factory. Soon after that, I met my husband and we lived in Madison. While I was happy to be with him, I missed green spaces. A few years later, we moved to a small town and had our children. We really enjoyed our home, but again, I craved wide open space, connection to nature, and what that could give our kids. I was, and am, a mom who wants her kids to be healthy and a healthy world for her kids. I want them to know where food comes from and to care for its origins. A few years later, we moved to our small 15-acre farm, which was the first time my husband lived in a rural area. After seeing firsthand the challenges of dairy farming, I knew that I did not want to have a dairy farm. That meant we had to find a new way to farm from what I knew. To be honest, at the time, I wasn't even comfortable saying the word farm when referring to our land because I had really only known farming to mean one thing, conventional dairy farm. Over the almost decade that we have lived here on Food Web Farms, I got more comfortable with calling our land a farm. We have raised a variety of plants and animals, bought several pieces of old equipment, and most importantly, learned new ways to farm. As I learned new ways about sustainability and practices such as no-till, I got more excited about possibilities. I also saw the farms around me through a new lens, and some of their practices started to make me sad. When we drive by a barren harvested field in the fall, one that will remain that way all winter, I used to remember that sense of pride and accomplishment that came with working the land to feed our animals all winter. Now when I see them, I feel differently. I see the loss of green space and plant life and feel that I want to do all that I can to work with the land and conserve its health. Being relatively new to conservation practices, I tend to group them into 4 categories: our animals, our plants, our nature, and us. When it comes to animals, the practice we implement the most is rotational grazing. Several times a year, mostly from April to November, we rotate the area of our farm that our sheep graze in. This helps our sheep and our soil stay healthier and well-fed. For our plants, it is using our animal waste as fertilizer. Each year, we implement various sustainable practices, such as the rotational grazing just mentioned, so that our animals and land can care for each other. This includes our mobile bird coops that we rotate around our property. They allow our birds to have lots of access to a wide variety of vegetation and insects while putting much needed nutrients back into the ground through the fertilizer they leave behind. When it comes to conservation practices to benefit nature, we leave sections of our field and pasture untouched for pollinators to use. Over the growing season, there are a variety of flowers from clover to apple blossoms to prairie flowers and more that we leave for the birds and insects as well as our bees. Again, taking small steps to help the land and animals care for each other. Sometimes other wildlife are able to use these areas as well to lay their nests or hide from predators. For us and our impact on the environment, our largest investment has been our solar array. There are many ways in which we as people use electricity, as well as ways we use it for our animals, including keeping water thawed in the winter. We have a ground array to power our whole farm that we had installed in 2021. Each of these were areas that we at least had in progress when we did our recent conservation plan. Some of the biggest benefits we got from doing our farm walk was seeing our land through fresh eyes. realizing that all that we had already done and getting reassurance that we were and are on the right track. As you can see from this photo, progress has definitely been made on our soil's health. Farming and conservation can sometimes feel like a solitary mission with sometimes divergent goals, and getting feedback from someone with more knowledge was a real boost for our confidence. It was also hugely helpful to identify areas where we can improve our existing practices, as well as new possibilities for the future. I wholeheartedly agree with Heather that we can't do it all, and especially not all at once. Setting goals, prioritizing them, and breaking them down to smaller steps are crucial practices for balancing conservation goals with the rest of life. Another suggestion I would have would be to realize that for almost everything that happens on a farm, in conservation and life in general, the planning takes way longer than the execution. Planning often involves research and gathering supplies, which are just as necessary as finishing the project, whether it is raising a flock of sheep, building a greenhouse, planting an orchard, or many other projects we have had here on our farm. Allow time for that. Realize that each step in the process is progress, even if it is not something you can see yet. This is useful no matter what area of your life you're addressing. Take time to see how far you have come on your goals, whether they are about your kids, your finances, your land, your health, etc. Take a moment to breathe and celebrate small victories. It can be a great way to restore your strength and perseverance for the challenges to come. And don't be afraid to readjust those goals when needed. My next suggestion is that much like our animals need fencing of various types, we need boundaries of various types. They are good for keeping what you want in and keeping other things out. They can be about your time, your finances, your space, your relationships, and more. They can be challenging to set, but it will be extremely helpful in creating your goals and sticking to them. If you have a clear financial boundary, you can be firm about what you will or will not spend on a project and make decisions that will work for you. If you have clear time boundaries and someone messages you about something else, you can stay focused on your project, knowing that you will get back to that later. But if you're like me, you might want to write that down somewhere to remember. If saying no to a project, activity, friend, etc. is difficult, then say, not right now, and give yourself some time and some space. As women and as a mom, we are often multitasking and can do dozens of things throughout a day and yet still not be sure what we accomplished. Setting boundaries can help us focus more on something for a longer period before we go back to our multitasking. I recently discovered the Eisenhower box as a method for deciding whether a task is something I should do because it's urgent and important, decide to schedule, meaning it's important but not urgent, delegate because it is urgent but not important, or delete, meaning it is neither urgent nor important. I found this method a really helpful way to approach things that pop up in my day. But I will admit, I rarely delete but push things far out my calendar, which is my version of not urgent or important, at least not right now. My final suggestion is to search out community. As I mentioned earlier, farming can feel solitary because a lot of your days are spent alone working with the land and animals. It can start to feel like when you are challenged by something that you are the only one who has to figure out how to deal with that issue. If you have a community or you are a part of, whether online or in person, it can help in so many ways. Learning from others' experiences, having a place to ask for information, and just knowing you are not the first or last person who will deal with Mother Nature and come away frustrated. It can also be a place to ask for help when life gets overwhelming, as it does for each of us at times. We can get overwhelmed even when things are going well, because that is when we start to expand our to-do list and our obligations. And before we know it, we are so busy that taking care of ourselves slips farther and farther down our priorities. Look for communities that help you care for you as well as for your land. I hope you find these tools helpful. I am working at each of them every day. It takes practice, but on the days it comes together, I can feel a real difference at the end of the day. I can wake up the next day more ready to face what Mother Nature brings in expected and unexpected ways, like produce growing in the garden or in the pig pen.
Terrific. Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. Quick question for you. Lisa Mueller was asking, how do you keep your solar panels clear in the winter from snow? Similar ones.
Yes, we have a squeegee that we use. So in the summer we have like a gentle water spray that we can use to clean like dirt and stuff up. In the winter we have a squeegee that we use after the snow comes down. It's got an extendable. So that's what we use. So yes, my husband is often out there after a snowstorm trying to gently clean that off to get our production back up.
Many of life's problems can be solved with a giant squeegee. We need that more often. Excellent. All right, and please keep questions coming. We will round out back to those at the end, and we were happy to hang out after one if there's other things folks want to dig more into. Terrific. And we'll now move on to Chris Frakes, who has been a longtime friend of WEWIC. Thank you, Chris. And she is a real advocate for rural mental health, for women farmers, women landowners, conservation. She does all this herself. And to connect all those dots and create those support systems and resources. So she runs Farmwell Wisconsin. We'll put that in the chat. It's a great resource for farmers, folks in rural areas on those resources. And she does all that through Southwest CAP. I got to get this right, Southern Wisconsin Community Action Program in Southwest Wisconsin. And again, has been such a tireless advocate of trying new things, of advocating and advocacy for us to have spaces to talk about these issues. So she will bring some of these themes home. And before we do that, Chris, I'm going to just quick kick off your poll here. We talked about what stresses us, but now let's move to what helps us nourish. What helps nourish us? So what most helps us nourish and renew ourselves on our conservation journey? So pick one quick. Where do you find your strength? Connecting with community like this, enjoying the land, like Heather was talking, spending time outdoors, taking care of your body, reflecting on progress year to year. It does add up. Not surprisingly, a lot of us are enjoying that land, getting outside, and that's why we all have spring fever right now. But all those other things, connecting with community, although interesting, not reflecting on progress year to year. So we can give a vouch for that one. It's sometimes overlooked clearly in that we don't appreciate the progress we've made. So on that note, take it away, Chris.
All right, thank you. All right, so yes, I decided to call my talk Conserving Self, Community, and Land. As Lisa said, I'm the founder of Farmwell Wisconsin, which is a program of Southwest CAP. We work primarily in southwestern Wisconsin, though we've been known to travel around the state, honestly. I'm currently our community wellness group director and oversee Farmwell in addition to our other mental health programs. All right, I'm trained in philosophy. That's my background. It's a useful degree. It's not. But I was feeling particularly philosophical when I was putting this together. So hang with me here a minute. So we all know, right, a standard definition of conservation is that conservation involves preservation, protection, and restoration of the natural environment and of wildlife. So the first question that always comes to mind when I'm reflecting on conservation, right, is are we as humans part of the natural environment, right? Because we live in a culture that has really tried to separate us from nature, right? And to make a strong separation between humans and the activities that we do and what is natural. So where are we in that place between as natural creatures and animals on the planet? The second question that always comes to my mind is what is it that we hope to preserve, protect, and restore? And I think when we're thinking about our conservation goals with our land, it's worth reflecting on, right? What are we trying to preserve? What do we want to protect? Is it, right, the pollinators? What are we trying to restore? Is it bringing native plants back to our own land? So these are helpful questions for me to just think about conservation. My own conservation journey started in southeastern Iowa. I grew up surrounded by the corn and soybean fields and hog confinements that are running amok across that state. About 25 years ago, my parents bought a property that you see on the left, and that picture really does not do justice to the degraded nature of the piece of land that they bought. The conventional farmer who'd been farming it for decades gave no thought whatsoever to even rudimentary conservation practices. All of his waterways were eroded. The subsoil was easily visible on all of his hilltops. He'd made no attempt in the decades he'd farmed the land to do any kind of contouring. And his crop rotation had been exclusively corn, soybeans, corn, soybeans, corn, soybeans. So the very first thing my folks did was to take about 60 acres of very degraded cropland and plant it into native prairie. Over the next 25 years, part of what we saw was this resurgence in natural species, both animal and plant, and a lot of biodiversity coming back onto their property and making use of the farm, all of the different aspects of the farm. About a year ago, I bought this property in Lafayette County. As you can see from the overview pictures of the 3 pictures on the left, there are lots of opportunities to start putting in conservation practices. So I had my conservation plan written last year. This will be my first summer trying to start to implement that. The previous owner was mowing about 7 of the 9 acres for a yard. And honestly, the soil and the grass, even the yard, is so degraded that the grass won't even grow at this point. So I've got a lot of work. I eventually, like Heather, want to be growing all of my own food. I hope to put up a high tunnel in addition to establishing pollinator areas and areas where wildlife can just come and exist in the little bit of forest that I have. Much of my foundational thinking about conservation was shaped throughout, really the previous 30 years by Aldo Leopold. And I'm sure this quote is very familiar to many of you, right? We abuse the land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see the land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect. I continue to think that Leopold is onto something here. We need to stop thinking of land, nature, our labor, lives, and livelihoods as commodifiable. Why was the farm that my parents bought in such a degraded state? It's because the previous owner had never thought of his land as anything other than a commodity, a resource for him to use and to use up for his own benefit. It's classic short-term economic thinking typical of capitalism. Conservation and self and community care challenge the status quo of business as usual. When we begin to think in terms of community, belonging, love, and respect, our orientation to the world and how we go about our daily practices will likely shift dramatically. I think both Heather and Michelle's stories gave lovely examples of that. So having said all that, I want to pause for a minute and ask us to think about what gets in the way of taking care of ourselves as we're trying to take care of our land. So let's start by acknowledging a few realities. Many of us wear multiple hats. We care for children and elders and households and paid employment and partners. And to quote Lisa, and. It can often feel that we have multiple conflicting duties and commitments that we're juggling, and we're trying to keep all the balls in the air. It can often feel like that we're running around with our hair on fire. And often when you listen to stories about self-care or advice about self-care, what we hear is it's pitched in the ways of 5 easy ways to de-stress or other kinds of quick fixes. Right? We get told that what we need to do to feel better is to buy something. It might be a massage. It could be bubble bath. It could be more shoes. Or for us, maybe it's more plants and trees. Right? But that it is buying things that somehow is going to fix the problem of our lives. Now, I'm certainly not against massage, bubble bath, lavender scented candles, or plants. But, right, the buying urge to fix that dominates American culture is at best a minor part of the solution. We live in a culture that encourages us to be cognitively oriented to outcomes and productivity, right? I've got this gigantic list, even my conservation plan. It was 60 pages long. I was totally overwhelmed, right? Like, here's the list of stuff to do and do it all right now. And instead, like Michelle and Heather both have already said, right, we have to break it down into small pieces and take time. We have to resist the cultural upbringing that we've been given to maximize our efficiency, right? Because conservation is not about efficiency. We need to stop making other people's priorities the thing that is driving our lives. Michelle did a great job of talking about this, figuring out how to say no or not right now. We need to resist our cultural emphasis on urgency. It all has to be done. It all has to be done right now before it's too late. We need to really dig into what cultural messages have we received about what hard work means and what laziness means, right? In the family farm where I grew up, hard work meant you worked until the work was done. We would be out there planting stuff by the flashlight on your phone, right? In more recent years, or with the headlights from a truck. That I think is a fool's errand of what hard work actually means. Some of you are old enough to remember the commercial for Anjali perfume about she can bring home the bacon, right? 1978, this dominated the airwaves, messaging to women, you can do it all. You can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, keep your man happy, right? Like the messages that we have absorbed about women, as women, about what it is that's reasonable for us to be able to do, that myth that we can multitask. Those are things we need to actually dig into and uproot. So here are some questions that I have. And part of what I'm going to say next comes out of a really fascinating interview I read of Anne Helen Peterson when she was interviewing an author of a new book that's coming out next week, I believe, called Real Self-Care by Dr. Pooja Lakshman. In it, they were talking about faux self-care, right? Faux self-care is that stuff like get some lavender scented candles, take a bath, and it'll all be fine. Because faux self-care exonerates oppressive structures like patriarchy and capitalism, white supremacy. It places the burden on the individual, that you have an individual problem you're trying to fix, as opposed to we have a systems problem. The social systems that have taken up root within us are broken. Well, they're not broken. They're working as designed, but they're not good for humans. They're not good for conservation, right? They're not good for nurturing future communities on our planet. Real self-care is about your relationship with yourself and with your community. And when I say community, I mean our land community included. Some of the questions we might want to ask ourselves have to do with all those balls we're trying to juggle and keep in the air. Which ones can bounce? Which ones can just fall? Michelle's box on the delete. I'm actually encouraging Michelle to actually delete stuff on her delete instead of just kicking it down the road. Right? What are the things you can set down? Again, to reiterate what Michelle said, where do you need to set better boundaries? Boundaries around your time, your energy, what you say yes to, so that you can prioritize your physical and mental well-being as you go through your lives and take care of your land. And when are we facing challenges that are not individual failures, no matter how much they may feel like it, but rather are the impossibility of living within systems that do not prioritize wholeness and restoration? Care work, real care work, including self-care and community care and care of our lands, is about investing in the future where the outcome is uncertain. It's about planting seeds, not knowing maybe what that tree will look like when 50 years from now we're not here. As all of us working in conservation likely know, the best growth takes place slowly. It requires deliberation and time. It requires slowing down, getting to know the particularity of your land, what belongs, right? What you can attract, what you can support on your land. We have a symbiotic relationship with the flora and fauna around us. Doing this work, conservation work, self-care and community care, is long work. It's also subversive. It goes against the culture in which we live. And it will not be understood by many people around you. When I started to let the grass on the one part of my land grow long, the neighbors had a panic because there were animals in there, right? So now I have to go have some conversations with them when I put the prairie in that section. But this work is vitally important, that we stop, we rest, we resist efficiency at all costs, and that we take the time to get to know ourselves, our communities, and our land. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, so much. And again, thank you, Michelle and Heather and everybody for being here today. We will open things up to questions, but before we do that, a couple of things I just wanted to give a quick plug to is we have two upcoming events that are part of our WeWiC Educator Network. But as Esther was saying in the beginning, we intentionally have a very broad interpretation of educator in the sense of I know there are people here in the room and like the Women from Pheasants Forever, where that is your job and your career and you might work for an agency or a nonprofit. Fantastic, we need you. But also there are, I would argue all women landowners are educators by nature because we're passionate about what we do. And we do all sorts of things to talk about our land and to get people out there. So a warm invite to both of these upcoming Educator Network events. We have one coming next Wednesday in the virtual space. We do this twice a year of an Educator Network meetup. We have different resources that we share. Becca Burkowski from the Wisconsin Environmental Educators Association will be sharing some resources, as well as a career share. Colleen Robinson, who's a conservation entrepreneur who started her own company, will be sharing there, so please join in. And the other one is our educator conference. These networking events have been going so well that we are excited to be able to do an actual conference in person on the 28th of April. It's in Stevens Point simply because we kind of looked at a map and said that would probably be most central for everybody. So we hope you can come. It's a great deal for a whole day of $25. Good food, I promise. I saw Kringle on the menu. There you go, priceless. So on that note, if folks need to go, have a wonderful day, a good March, and we'll see you hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And we will be keeping in touch via our newsletter on all these upcoming events coming in the summer, field days, learning circles, etc., as well as we'll be doing again in the virtual space like last summer, our summer camp series. This spoiler alert, it's going to be on animals and creating habitat for all sorts of critters on our land this year. So you will see more of that. That will kick off in May. So on that note, we will open up to questions, and feel free to stick something in the chat, or please feel free to unmute yourself too if there's anything at all. And Esther gave a reminder that yes, we need to register for the educator conference by April 1st for a discount on pricing. That's the $25. Plus, I do think that's going to sell out, so grab a seat. And Chris, if I could throw a question to you, and I'll just look for it in the chat, because thank you, Kelly, for sharing. Kelly's in a situation dealing with illness in the family with a husband farmer with cancer, and when people get sick in our families, it's a gap, it's a need, it's a situation, and she's doing a great job in trying to balance all of this stuff. But when we lose someone in our family, hopefully not permanently, but just in a situation where they can't do their usual role, what are some things for us as the women in the house, women to think about? And Ken, Kelly, feel free to, I appreciate you sharing. Please feel free to jump in with more.
Yeah, I'm finding like I'm very committed to what we're doing here and feel very much like I'm functioning with two left hands on the farm front. And last summer, I was just able to throw the messages out there. Got lots of people to come and help. Right now, I've got my painting clothes because I'm painting our upstairs, trying to just like pave the way for people who might want to come and stay for a week or 2 weeks for various periods throughout the summer to lend a helping hand. I know physically, given my schedule, there's no way that I can do everything that needs to be done. And so just trying to figure out, how to manage it all and how to parcel it out, or do I need to be looking at other remedies? But I feel like at present, my husband's in a situation where he can actually advise and educate and teach. He just won't be able to do a lot of the hands-on
Yeah, sure. And please, thank you again for sharing, Kelly. That's a huge load. If folks have other ideas or support, please put it in the chat. Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're doing a lot of the things I would first think of. I also think really sitting with that question of what can be let go of, right? Like you want to do it all and maybe it's not possible, right? So sitting with, are there things that can be let go of, at least in the short run? And then, right, like the thing that popped to my mind is shortly after the birth of my twins, I was not doing well, like very different situation than a major illness. And for those of you who have children, you can appreciate. And I kept saying, how can I do this all better? Right. And somebody I was consulting with said, you can't, you need more help. Right. Like, so again, what are those? Wolfer, I think that's one of the thoughts I had. Where are those points where I can bring in extra help, but not have the extra help create more work for me that actually is a burden, right? So thinking about who can you get to help manage things on the farm or land, or bring food, or do whatever, like the pieces of care work, what can you let go of? I'm also thinking of an article Michelle posted once about, right, how to do laundry while you're depressed. Don't, right? Like just let it go, or don't worry about folding, right? Like wash clean clothes, great, throw them in a pile on a certain area and that's good enough, right? Like, so how can we let go of some of the standards maybe we're used to so that things become more manageable, right? So there's no magic solution there, but let go of what you can, get help for where you need it, and let go of standards that you just can't maintain.
Yeah. The irony is in addition to being a therapist and a manager, I'm also a coach, a health and wellness coach. So, and I specialize in climate coaching and aligning climate coaching with all of the other hats that you wear.
I finally found what food climate metabolism is.
I have to turn that lens of coaching on to myself big time.
So speaking from experience, those things, we can know things and still, but knowing them and doing them are two very different things. So yes, if you can give yourself little visuals around somewhere, reminders. That's why I kind of like that box one, that it's just a small little thing I can put some places or other things like that to, keep reminding yourself, because it can be easy to forget that those are the things you should be doing, even though you know them.
Yeah.
Hey, Michelle, is that how to do laundry when you're depressed at TEDx Talk?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay. I found it. I'll put it in the chat.
Yes.
And something I've been personally doing on that note, Kelly, is in like my morning journal routine, I've been literally answering the question, like, what can I let go of today? And it's amazing what you come up with. And just writing the fact, like, I'm not going to fold the laundry today, gives me permission. I thought it was a little corny when I started it. I read it somewhere and I was like, oh yeah. And then you stick to it. And at the end of the day, I look at it from the day past. And I was like, that really didn't matter, Lisa. You know what I mean? But it would have been on my to-do list. And it sort of moved my don't-do list. Again, other questions on any topic, going back to conservation too, or specifics for Heather and Michelle, please ask or put it in the chat. All right. Well, we are all still around. We'll be meeting again and gathering again. So all good as we kick off into spring. Thanks for humoring our WeWick team on our spring case of spring fever, but I know we're amongst kindred sister spirits here, and look forward to keeping in touch. Again, everybody who's registered for this session, if you're new to WeWick, you will now get regular things via email on all the good things coming up, and join in anytime. We look forward to seeing you. And a shout out again, thank you to Julie Peterson and Gretchen Sadowski, who've been a little bit in the background answering questions. We really appreciate their expertise being here, and happy March. See y'all soon.